Um,
This meeting is
there we
being
go.
recorded.
There we go. We don't talk about the atomic bomb very much. People talk about, oh, there we developed this, we used it, it ended the war. Let's move on. But we don't really talk about what happened, how it was developed, and the weight of that decision at all. Similarly to how we don't understand or process or talk about the Holocaust in depth, which, and I've explained this before, but one of the reasons I have been preloading some of the stuff like pogroms in Europe, where it's like state sponsored violence against Jewish communities, which is not unique to Germany. Like they were doing that all over the place, especially in Russia. And kind of showing that the history of both anti Semitism and Zionism together, in the hopes that when we now, as we're approaching the Holocaust, we can start to wrap our minds around it, because even history majors graduate college and go like, I don't really get it. I don't understand how that could even happen. So I was preloading all those things on purpose because Holocaust denial is rising rapidly. I've talked to a lot of people on stereo about that, about like the rising, revisionist history of like Holocaust denial. It's such a massive thing. A lot of my semesters, I've finished this course and people have come up to me and said, thank you for like everything you showed us and taught us about the Holocaust. I thought it was fake. I feel really bad. I used to make jokes about it in high school. In this class at AVC, I'm not talking about the rest of the country. It's widespread everywhere. I think one of the reasons we deny that or try to embrace alternative explanations, even if they're crazy ones, is because the reality of wrapping our minds around that is too big for us if we haven't like looked at all the groundwork leading up to something like that. And then even then it's a very big pill to swallow, because it's either inconceivable, we can't understand how the Holocaust happened, so we're like, oh well, that's just Hitler. Hitler hated Jewish people. How did one dude kill 6 million people? I don't think so. Anti-Semitism's been around in Europe for centuries, right? France was anti-Semitic. Germany was. Britain was. Their anti-Semitism was spread all over the place. And before some of those countries got invaded, they willingly shipped off Jewish people to the Germans. It's so that element is something that we don't totally have in America. There's anti-Semitism here for sure, but largely like it's a European thing. So we don't understand anti-Semitism in the historic way that Europeans would. So like looking at not just the details of the Holocaust, but the things leading up to it help us reckon with what it is. So even knowing all that, like I said, it's a hard pill to swallow, but that is much better than just saying, oh, Hitler killed 6 million Jews. You just have to accept it. Moving on. Like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to show footage of it. It's so goddamn uncomfortable. We cannot handle talking about it. History teachers can't handle talking about it because it brings up all kinds of like existential questions and problems and things that most historians are not equipped to grapple with, especially high school history teachers. They're really ill prepared to, talk about, well, what does that mean for humanity? Because Hitler didn't kill all the Jews. Europe killed all the Jews. It wasn't even just the Germans, which means anybody's capable of that. Like we don't want to think about what that actually might mean. The same way we don't really want to think about what it means that we've developed nuclear weapons and then that we use them against civilian populations. Of all the things I could think to talk about that would make me uncomfortable, those two things are at the very top of the list. So if we don't talk about them or just mention them in passing with a little check mark because we had to cover them in a high school history curriculum, is setting people up to be Holocaust deniers. Because if we can't understand it, can't wrap our mind around it, and somebody comes along and says, this is a conspiracy. This is the rich people or the Jews or anybody else. They're spreading this. This is not really how it worked. Hitler was actually a really good guy. Look at all these other things he did. So this has been one of the themes I've talked on stereo several times about because it's so widespread. And like so many things in history, when we don't actually cover the details and depth of it, we are set up to fail in that. So looking early on about like, well, where were the origins of World War II? They might actually predate World War I even. Where are the origins of, the atomic bomb? Oh, that accelerated greatly before during the war.
The origins of World War II absolutely were originated by World War I, certainly.
Yeah.
And then And then actually what I think about it is that the origins of World War I were actually going on for the ancient freaking wars across Europe.
Yeah.
That existed between the cultural wars between the Catholics and the Jews and just the various peoples that existed in the days.
Oh, you're totally right, Joel. And and if we had more time, we could go all the way back to the Roman Empire if we wanted to look at some of the origins, right? Certainly medieval Europe, it's like, oh, well, France and Germany, Germany is a very recent invention too. There's all kinds of different German states, but all the ones on the border of France, they've hated each other for centuries. They've gone to war probably hundreds of times.
It's ridiculous. The Huns and the Goths and the guy. There's just so many.
Yeah.
Tribes that, especially after the Black Plague and the fall of Rome. I mean, it was chaos.
Right, because the Black Plague, guess who got blamed for that in a lot of European cities? The Jews, right? It's like, oh, those dirty people brought in this disease.
Of course. So was the Jews.
Scapegoating. So in World War I, there are so many things, and you had a couple questions about this on your test, guys, about the Treaty of Versailles. There's a lot of things that get set up, implemented there. The way the war ended sets up World War II. But the lie of World War I for America was Woodrow Wilson's like, we're going to go to war to make the world safe for democracy, whatever the hell that means. And because democracy doesn't seem like a safe idea or a safe thing. And also a war to end all wars. Well, when the hell has a war ever not perpetuated a future war? That's why it's like, well, we could go all the way back to Rome. We could go so far back to look at the origins of World War II and these historic hatreds and stuff like that clearly we don't have time to do that here. I would love to teach a World War II class because there's so much to talk about. There's no way we could do it in 1 week or one chapter of a survey American history class. What was that?
Can we do Operation Barbarossa?
Oh, yeah.
We
will do that in here. Definitely that one. I'd love to go back.
One of the key points in the whole.
Yeah. It's the
history.
It's the single turning point of the war. Actually, Hitler loses after Operation Barbarossa, which is the invasion of Russia, which was Napoleon's downfall. If we were able to spend time and actually go back and look at the Napoleonic Wars, which were really like the First World War, just in early industrialization, not like the Second Industrial Revolution, post-industrialism. We could see so many things. Obviously, we don't have time to do that in an American history survey class, which is even, some of you guys even asked, like, why are we looking at like Jewish history in Europe for an American survey history class? Which is a fair question. I'd probably ask that question if I was a student too. But the answer is like, we have to understand the why. Otherwise, we are totally set up to believe alternative answers to why that happened that are easier for us to accept and believe than, oh, well, humans are pretty evil and we do this stuff to each other when we have the means. Hitler's just the first one to really do this on a large scale after the Industrial Revolution. Like World War I should have warned us, but people didn't take note. They didn't take the warning. So I've been telling you guys, I've been moving my material over from Top Hat, which is an online publishing company where I was working on this stuff and trying to put stuff together, over to Satori because AVC declared it illegal for me to sell my textbook to students, even though it was $40 and the book I was using before was $160. I wasn't making $40 a piece off the books, but I wanted to go through a publisher. They shut it all down. So I've been slowly like trying to port everything over for you guys. The first few sections of like our class and how it's broken down, the 1860s, 70s, 80s, they're like 9,000 words each from what I wrote. And I was writing them quick. I wrote like 4 or 5 chapters in like a month and a half. Like I was pumping stuff out, but they're pretty slim. They get a little bit bigger as I go into the 20s and 30s. As you could probably tell from Satori, it's like there seems like there's more stuff here, more material, more things to read. By the time I got to World War II, it took me 6 months to write that chapter. And it was 200,000 words when I was done, which is a textbook in and of itself. And at some point when I've got time, I want to try to like reformat it and package it as a textbook for a World War II class. We don't have that at AVC, but a lot of colleges do. And 200,000 words is way too much to expect anybody to read in any history, any college class for a chapter.
You would write a book that large, I would have already like lost myself into sleep. Just trying to do.
It's way too long. So I'm just at the point of starting to import that stuff over, and I'm trying to decide like what to include and not to include, because to me, it's all important. But obviously, this is too much. That bar is way too high for a survey course at Harvard. Like you would not expect a sophomore at Harvard to read 200,000 words for one chapter of a history book. That's a history book in and of itself. So I'm trying to like narrow this down and actually hone in on the most important parts of it. But there's so much here, and it shapes the world to today. We're still living with the ramifications of World War II and what that means.
Absolutely.
For us. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's reverberating even to this day.
Yeah.
From Vietnam to the Korean War to every war that's still going on.
Even the Middle East?
The world today.
Yeah.
It's Middle East. It's amazing.
I think it's why.
Not amazing in a way that I think that is a good thing, but amazing in a way that I think it's destroying our country.
Yeah.
Our world.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I think it's probably one of the reasons why even non-history people that are like, history's not my thing, I don't like it, which is a lot of people. They're usually interested in World War II. In fact, it's usually the topic we have the most questions on because we do such a piss poor version of explaining the Holocaust, explaining nuclear fission, explaining global conflict that sucks pretty much everybody into it. Like, we don't do that. So we're all left with questions. So we want to know more about that topic. But like, even the History Channel, they'll show you footage of Hitler all day long. In history, when I was doing my history major, all my teachers called it the Hitler Channel.
Let me stop you here. You gotta rebrand the History Channel. It's called the HYSTR History Channel.
Right.
History.
Don't call it the History Channel.
Yeah.
Because it's like global aliens and all this.
Right.
Stuff,
right. It's like, if 60% of your programming is B footage from World War II about Hitler, who everybody's kind of interested in, and the other 40% is about aliens, can you really call yourself a History Channel? They're not the best source. They're not. It's not all bad, but it's not all great either. They don't have a great reputation.
It used to be good, but it now sucks.
Yeah, like 20 years ago it was fine. But now it's like, well, they're a for-profit television station.
This garbage channel is like Kardashians.
Yeah, it's like, you guys might as well be A&E or like a non-history channel, because it's not good history. It's not even history for a lot of it. So, yeah, I've found that to be like, oh, this is probably why we care about this a lot, though, is because we have so many unanswered questions about it. So not that I'll have time to answer all your questions, but I will certainly, I don't even know if I'll try. I'm just saying, like, we can get to the rub of some of these big issues like nuclear war. I'm going to grab a book. Hold on. I just saw it. Where is it? Okay, so for those of you guys that like espionage and baseball, go Dodgers, by the way. Good job yesterday, guys.
Woohoo.
This book,
I
The Catcher Was a Spy. It's about a famous... The Catcher Was a Spy. Like Catcher in the Rye, right? But The Catcher Was a Spy. Yeah. It's about Moe Berg, who was a famous catcher in the 30s and 40s, who starts working as a secret operative for the, like, basically what will be the CIA during World War II. And they've got a few people like that they're like celebrities that they recruit as spies. It's very interesting, as is the two most recent books I read about this subject are, I say read, but I audibled them. Because I like audiobooks a lot. One is called Blitzed, and it's all about drug use in the Third Reich, but also everywhere else, and how the government created methamphetamine and started feeding its people in large quantities to make them better soldiers.
Government cheese?
Yeah. Government cheese that gets you jacked. Right.
Yeah, Joel told me about that.
Yeah.
It's cheese has a chemical that when you eat it, it converts to, gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it turns into casein or something.
Isn't casein what people who are allergic to, like, gluten allergies? It's really casein?
No. It's if you eat cheese, every cheese you eat, I don't care if even today, it will turn into basically morphine. 10% of it.
No wonder I love cheese so much.
No wonder I like cheese so much.
You're right.
So about 10% of any cheese you eat will turn into morphine. And that was what was like, oh, we can subdue our population. That was the thing in the 1929 that you're talking about.
I gotta say, if somebody was like, cheese is gonna give you cancer, I don't know
Well,
that
that
I'd
was
care.
macaroni
I'd be
and
like,
cheese.
all right, we
That
just
was-
got to
that
pay a
was-
certain
that-
price in
That
life.
was the government food program, macaroni and cheese. So we were giving you pasta and cheese, and then the cheese, of course, would.
I grew up with government cheese. We were on
Me
food
too.
stamps when I was a kid. I ate that Velveeta, man.
So did I.
I eat that cheese food, which isn't even cheese, right? So
That
here's
liquid gold.
liquid
But
gold.
that
Here's
but
the
10% of that cheese would turn into basically heroin.
well, no wonder people love cheese so much. This is not focusing for me. This was the other book that I read that's called The Bastard Brigade. And it's great. It's a great Audible book. It's very easy to listen to. And it talks about some of these secretive spy initiatives like Mo Berg. But it's all centered around atomic intelligence, trying to beat the Germans to make an atomic bomb. It was another great book. So that helped me understand the development of the nuclear bomb at an even deeper level. I don't have a fantastic book about the Holocaust that I'd recommend, but we'll get into that. We'll talk about that more. And I'm not saying there are not great books on the Holocaust. I'm just saying, like, I don't have one like this that I'd recommend on that specific subject. So, okay, so it's 9:01. I'm going to go for a few more minutes. If you guys are like, got to get somewhere, feel free to just hop off our Zoom call. I'll just try to set up the global stage for how World War II is enveloping before us so that next week we're primed to just jump into the actual conflict. So, okay, so on my screen here, you guys see this thing about oil, the speed of sound, the cost of oil. This is so critical to World War II, and we never talk about it at all. Germany, they lose the war because of Operation Barbarossa. They lose it because Hitler was psychotic and didn't really have a plan for anything. He's just kind of like always rolling on to the next thing. Sound like any U.S. politicians, you know? I don't know.
Let me correct you.
But at the end of the war, they ultimately lose because they lose the Baku oil fields in like the Ukraine, which they were trying to do because Hitler was trying to grab too much at the same time. They get kicked out of the Middle East. They have no oil. The war ends. They've got Luftwaffe planes, tons of them on the ground. They've got pilots even. They have no fuel to put in them to make them go. They can't fuel their tanks anymore. And a lot of World War II that gets really underplayed in our history books is the race to oil. So there's really two big races going on. One is to the oil fields in the Ukraine and Iran and other places, which we're recently discovering. We're recently figuring that out about Saudi Arabia. Oil's a new invention in terms of like mechanical machines. Petroleum's, this is a relatively new thing still in World War II. But World War II proves like, oil is the most important natural resource we have on the earth, which of course is true for the rest of the 20th century, is still true today in terms of how we perceive it, even if it's not actually the most important natural resource we have. So that element is very important for the war. As you guys saw and we talked about, this is an important thing in World War I. Like there's a major conflict and like struggle over who gets these mandates, kind of how we were talking about, you know, having a mandate over your slaves or a mandate over these colonial people you have to raise up. We conveniently create mandates for, you know, all these oil rich countries that we go, well, I'll take this one, you take that one, they take that one, and these will be our countries, and we'll grow them up into independence, which was never really a goal for anybody, in order to, you know, promote them and raise them up. But it was really to ensure that we would have vast reserves of oil for the next war. So oil's critically important for that reason. The other big like race for resources at the end of the war is the German brain power. It's trying to get Heisenberg. It's trying to get Werner von Braun, the rocket scientist who makes the V2 rockets. Like, the Russians are coming in from the east, and we're trying to press through in the west, but the Russians are kicking ass and taking names. They're like, I'll say this categorically now. I'll say it next week. I'll say it the next time we talk about World War II. The Russians won World War II, in Europe at least. Like, we don't have to talk about Japan. That's a different thing. They would have killed Japan. By the end of the war, they were a machine, and they were building better tanks than Germany for cheaper and quicker. Like, they eventually got their war machine so down that everybody was terrified of them, including America. It's one of the reasons that the Cold War happens and the shift in alliances goes down at the end of the war. So those two rushes, though, to try to get those things are very, very central to the war, because by as early as 1943, we pretty much know the war is over. We know Hitler's going to lose. We know that the writing is on the wall for that. It then becomes more of a matter of like, well, what do we do with this? How do we win the war? What are the most important things we want to win out of the war? It's not necessarily the liberation of Europe, though we need to rebuild all of our trading partners, like you were saying earlier. It's also kind of like, hey, who's going to get these critical resources to dominate the world after the war? The atomic bomb and control of the world's oil supply? Yeah, those are probably two really important ones to get. So this is a critical step. I'm going to switch over to like Top Hat now, which you guys don't have access to, but I'm trying to port this stuff over. I open this whole saga up with a quote from a German Nazi general, Henning von Tresckow, who initially supported Hitler greatly, but by like 42, 43, he realized like, oh, I have made a mistake. And he has got some great quotes that I try to incorporate through our material here. He who can keep his childhood dream alive and pure, who can preserve then in his bare defenseless heart, who despite the world's mockery dares to live as he dreamed as a child until his days, then he is a man, a true and complete man. That quote might seem out of place right now. It will be filled in as we step further into the war. Africa, colonialism, Asia, all of those things are at play here. And I'll make all this material available to you guys. Even things like the Volkswagen Beetle, the Volkswagen, the people's car. That's Hitler. Hitler starts that. It's his invention. And it's one of the things that makes him wildly popular. He is a great leader in the eyes of Germany. Like, had Hitler died in 1936, he'd still be remembered as one of the greatest Germans of all.
Did you get cut off?
Sorry, my audio wigged out for a second there.
Yeah, it's already 9 o'clock. Do we have to stay?
No, I already told you guys. You can leave. You're good to go. I'm not even going to go that much longer because I've got more stuff I need to record tonight for other things. But, yeah, you're free to hop off now. I'm just going to try to wrap up the setting up of the stage for World War II in terms of, like, what's going on in Europe at the time, what's going on in, well, Germany very specifically, but kind of the rest of the world. So I probably won't even be able to do that, but I did want to just lay out a few things that are pretty critical for us to understand if we're going to understand World War II and even understand the rise of Hitler, because, you know, we look back on him now and go, that dude's deranged. Who the hell elected him? Why did everybody follow him? That is the deceptive allure of hindsight when we're studying history to be like, those idiots, those stupid people, those simple people back then, without actually trying to enter into their world and be like, well, what would I know in 1940 or 1935? What would my position be if I was trying to be a good citizen and live by the rules in Germany in 1935, even as a Christian, right? Obey the state, do what they say. This leader said he's a Christian guy. Like, Hitler was definitely not a Christian. That was another good World War II book I read. It's called Hitler's Religion, which is not like one thing. He has his own kind of metaphysical ideas about the world. And those combined with history is what like mobilizes the Germans. Yeah.
Well, he used the Olympics as a platform to, do his propaganda and his ideas of his new government regime. And that's why a lot of people after that are totally against the torching of, showing the peace and everything about all these, countries coming together and competing. That's not the case. He banned Jewish from participating in the Olympics in Berlin.
Yeah.
So, and, I don't know. It's just crazy how he used that platform to really push his propaganda.
He did.
And he made a lot of money, like $7 million out of that whole Olympics.
Well, he also personally made money off of like his book Mein Kampf and like making it a party book that it's still one of the best-selling books in Germany of all time.
Yep.
And people knew about anti-Semitism. By 1936, they knew Hitler was crazy. He cleaned it up for the Munich Olympics, and the world, for the most part, bought this kind of lie. They bought like, okay, because they went around Munich, they took down all the anti-Jewish signs. They like loosened all the laws for the summer. Like they tried to put a few Jews in the Olympics. It's like, oh, you guys are really going out of your way to sell this.
The female swimmers, for that fact, he put in female swimmer Jewish. In there just to show that, but it was very minimal for the people that participated.
Yeah.
I think the U.S. wanted to actually opt out of the Olympics, but then decided not to, of course, because we got 56 medals that year, gold medals.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
The year of the Olympics, so 1936, that's when the Munich Olympics is. And I can't remember the name of the movie. I think it might just be called Owens. It came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago about Jesse Owens, the Black American sprinter who wins big at the Munich Olympics. And it was very controversial, even for Americans. It's all about the 1936 Olympics and his kind of rise there, which, by the way, we do Jesse Owens dirty when he comes back. We do not treat him like an honored hero at all.
A star, basically.
Yeah. So
like the crisis of racism goes on and on and on and on, and here we are in 2020, and it's on and on today. When does it stop? My gosh.
Oh, yeah, I don't know, because it's kind of like dealing with racism. The way we deal with it is a little like how we say, oh, this will be a war to end all wars. Like, enforcing policies on people ain't going to change anybody's heart, but different countries have different racism.
Your skin is, what ethnicity you are, and here it is still today. It's just disgusting.
Well, you got a lot of people who just don't accept what a group of people being treated in that way. Like you said, there's some people who don't even believe that the Holocaust existed. Blacks were never lynched. I was just talking with my friend about the massacre that you just talked about, the Tulsa massacre. And he's like supposed to be a real history guy and everything like that, and he didn't even know it. And I understand that not everyone knows these little things, but he wouldn't. He's a Trump, supporter. He won't acknowledge it. That he's like, well, why do you always bring up the bad in history? I'm like, well, you got to take the good with the bad. Like, what are we doing? Like, and he's like, well, when I talk about the war, he's all interested, but then when I bring up like the little things like those topics, he don't want to hear. And so we still have people who just will not acknowledge it. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to move on to what they think is how, America is for one-sided view, but that's not how it is for everyone else.
Yeah.
Well, another thing too, Professor, back to what you were saying, hon. I didn't know anything. I just knew about the Indian properties, the lands being taken away and everything. But reading now that my project is about wars, and started reading back to the 1700s, how everything started, put into perspective, it goes into details the wars of, we took away land from Mexico, we took away land from the Indians, and then we want to kill them all, but we couldn't, so we put them in these concentration camps and let them call, this is your land from this piece of land, this other land, this is your land. I mean, who comes up with this stuff? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Want us to praise the Pledge of Allegiance during the Super Bowl, but then you don't want to give people, honor them, or, want to treat them like crap, like Colin Kaepernick. So it's just like, how are you going to get these kids to a pledge? I would never say the Pledge of Allegiance, because freaking America doesn't back me. I mean, for me personally, no. What the heck? I'm going to sit there and say the Pledge of Allegiance for what?
Well,
and even if they did, the Pledge of Allegiance is a piece of government propaganda. Even if America's good for you, you can go like, this isn't good for America.
A racist, right? So if you look at the last two chapters of the Pledge of Allegiance, it's completely racist. And not only that, the person that wrote it was a misogynist and a racist.
Yeah,
so
it's all it's government propaganda to kind of like we were talking about earlier, the melting pot, right? Everybody say this, everybody be this. If you're not this, you're bad. And then in the 50s, we insert one nation under God in there to stick it to the communists, right? Like that wasn't even the original pledge, but we can add things in as they benefit us. And so, okay, so you guys see right here, the Munich Olympics, that's Jesse Owens. And I'm going to show you a quote from him. Hitler didn't snub me. It was FDR who stubbed me. The president didn't even send me a telegram for winning gold medals at the Olympics. And that's why I said, we do him dirty. It gets worse from there. His story is a sad one. But you can see right underneath this idea about a double victory, which America can't foresee as a problem to keep supporting white supremacy. It's like, we got to go over and beat racism and beat this anti-Semitism over there because Jewish people have money in America and Jewish people are important. Black people are still not, and they still do not have money. But they go, hello, kettle, this is the pot. You're black. Like, hypocrisy much. We're going to defeat racism abroad, but not defeat it at home? I don't think so. So they begin calling for what they call a double V, a double victory over racism abroad and racism at home. And it's what starts the second wave of the civil rights movement is World War II.
And South Africa was still going on at the same time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Big time. They go longer than America.
Big fucking time. And in many other places, black people were being exploited by colonialism through the 50s and the 60s, big time. And we're still dealing with those populations to this day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we totally
Yes,
are.
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Who was it, Joe, for your perspective? What's his name?
Joel, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I'm going to go ahead and try to do my test.
Okay, all right. Good luck on that. Good luck on that.
Yeah.
All right.
Want to help me?
I'll close with this. The
Okay.
fascism and anti-Semitism. I try to go through a few different key countries here, like Italy, and their expeditions into Ethiopia are really probably one of the first clear signs of a global conflict that's coming. That some people can recognize, but most people are blind to. Colonialism in Africa in general, and the European powers still having colonial assets all over America. This will be another one of those. And then Germany, the same time they have the Munich Olympics, and try to say like, oh look, we cleaned it all up. We're not anti-Semitic. We're not militaristic. They're against the Treaty of Versailles. They're actively arming. They're like creating an air force. They're making more weapons. They're remilitarizing. Now they get to practice their weapons. I'll go down just a sec here to where is it? The Spanish-American War.
We can't see that right now.
Oh, I'm not screen sharing with you?
Well, I can't see it on my tutorial. I have it open right now, but it's not on the.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't gone to add everything to Satori yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be doing that. But in 1936, you're going to have the Spanish-American War. This is also where Japan takes a kind of drastic turn, and this is where Francisco Franco, the like dictator who's going to rule Spain till the 70s. Grabs power and grabs hold of everything. This is a great episode on that, and the Spanish Civil War and what's going on. The Germans get to test out their new air force secretly in Spain by bombing civilians, the Basque population. This is where Hermann Göring, he's like the head of the Luftwaffe, the Air Force, and will become second in command after Hitler kills himself. They like cut their teeth here. And Italy's doing the same thing in Ethiopia, and the League of Nations, which America didn't join because we don't want to have to be committed to any foreign war. We don't want to have to like deal with anybody else's problems. We don't join it, even though the whole damn thing was our idea. Falls apart because they don't have any. They've got no teeth. They can't stop Hitler. They can't stop Mussolini. And they also have no like moral ground to stand on to say like colonialism's wrong. They're all participating in it the whole way through the war, and in post-war setup, Winston Churchill is trying to actively like not just retain the British Empire, get more possessions and build it up stronger, even while they're using the language of anti-colonialism, which goes back to World War I. After World War II, Britain's still trying to hold on to their colonial positions, and they will for another 20, 30 years. So the Spanish War, the Spanish Civil War and Franco, that's an important key. That is like a crucial element. But what I want you guys to like read through, and it'll be long, and like we really don't talk about religion in history. In modern history text, we just try to stay away from it because it's like a hornet's nest. But I don't care. I don't care at all. We have to talk about it. So I've written a good handful of things on religion in Germany at the time and the role of the church, as well as the role of those Christian leaders and pastors who actively take a stance against Hitler and will even die because of it, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of my favorite theologians. He dies in German camps at the very end of the war. But the church, the national church, changes dramatically during these times. So yeah, like read through that. because that's such a critical element. And if we can't see the parallels between religious nationalism in Germany and religious nationalism in America, we got a blindfold on. So let me close with this this poem. First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not. Hold on. First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Martin Niemöller. That's a thought we should think about as people are being attacked around us who are not necessarily us, who our destiny is not necessarily tied up in. Me as a white guy, my good fortune in life is not connected to, I mean, I think it is, but on a technical level, it's not attached to black Americans. That's what white privilege is, right? Like, I can go on with my life ignoring all of that and just try to do well and have my best life now. But if we look at ourselves as one group of people, that's certainly not true. So looking beyond our immediate context and like, what does this do for me? That's how we avoid holocausts happening. When we act like that, we are just laying out a table for fascists and dictators to not just torture, but like literally like try to exterminate groups of people that we don't really care about because they don't affect us, whatever that group might be. And as Americans, black, white, anything in between, we can have that perspective for the rest of the world. So you might be oppressed in America, but you're better off than somebody who lives in Afghanistan or the Sudan, right? So you don't really care what happens over there. You care about what's happening here for you. We've got to care across the board. Otherwise, we'll be blind to this stuff when it happens. Just like the Germans were totally blind to this. All the Christian Germans and the Christian church who supported Hitler and the Nazis, including the Catholic Church. That's all I'll say about that for tonight.